Seminar on the 1988 Spitak earthquake in Armenia. I'm Ainsley Trahan. I'm a PhD student here in the Department of Geography at Cambridge, and I'm joined on Zoom by my other co-conveners today. So today we will be hearing from Suren Arakelian, who is the director of the GeoRisk Scientific Research Company in Armenia, where he's been working since the earthquake. And Suren will give us some background as well as kind of the broader discussion on his own work. And just to let you know that there will be ample time for questions and discussion at the end of his talk. We would also kind of like to highlight that this talk comes at, unfortunately, a very relevant time, given what is happening in Turkey and Syria. And in thinking about the topic of today's seminar, an earthquake that occurred in 1988, we also consider it important to think about what is happening currently. So without further ado, I'm very happy to introduce Suren to you. And Suren, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ainsley. Hello, everyone. My name is Suren. Thank you for introducing me. My background is geophysicist, but since 1988, Spitak earthquake, I involved in the disaster risk management, the disaster hazard assessment, natural disaster. And I try to share my knowledge and experience about this earthquake. First, I would like to express my acknowledgements to Dr. Nazaretyan from National Survey for Seismic Protection of Armenia, whose materials I used for this presentation. Okay. Okay. The 1988 Spitak earthquake, despite not being exceptional from a seismological point of view, was a major disaster that caused hard consequences. It is considered as one of the world's most studied earthquakes and provides valuable lessons for seismic disaster mitigation. The causes of the Spitak disaster were many, including mistakes on seismic hazard assessment, design, construction, and maintenance of residential building, and disaster of management mistakes as well. These mistakes led to increased seismic vulnerability and poor emergency response during the first days of disasters, resulting in the significant human and material losses. The Spitak earthquake highlighted the importance of effective disaster preparedness and response measures, including early warning system, emergency drills, and search and rescue efforts. The earthquake also led to increased forces on the importance of community participation and engagement in disaster risk reduction and preparedness. The Spitak earthquake led to drastic revision of the foundation of seismic hazard assessment, disaster risk reduction, and disaster risk management, not only in Armenia, but in Caucasus and other seismic prone regions. The earthquake highlighted the need for comprehensive approach of seismic hazard assessment, including the consideration of all possible sources of seismic hazard and the development of reliable seismic hazard maps. In this presentation, we will analyze in more details the causes of such catastrophic consequences. At the same time, we will consider the lessons learned from the disaster, which led to drastic revision of the practices of seismic hazard assessment. So, Armenia is a landlocked country in South Caucasus region in Eurasia. It is bordered by Turkey to the west, Georgia to the north, Azerbaijan to the east, and Iran to the south. Armenia has a total area about 30,000 square kilometers, and population is estimated around 3 million people. The capital and largest city is Yerevan with population more than 1 million people. The second and third largest cities are Gyumri, former Leninakan, and Vanadzor, former Kirovakan, with population of 230,000 and 170,000 respectively. Both cities were situated in Spitak earthquake epicentral area. For better understanding the causes of the catastrophic consequences of Spitak earthquake, we must first understand its geological nature. And I will try to briefly outline it. Armenia is located in the central part of Alpine-Himalayan seismic zone in Anatolian Caucasus segment, with the collision zone of Arabian and Eurasian plates. Alpine-Himalayan seismic zone, also known as Alpine belt, is a major earthquake-prone area that stretched from Mediterranean region across the Middle East and Central Asia to Southeastern Asia. The collision between Arabian and Eurasian plates was a result of the formation of several active faults in the region, including the North Anatolian fault, East Anatolian fault, and Elburz fault. Elburz fault, the most significant recent earthquake in the area was the devastating Kahramanshah earthquake on February 6 this year, with magnitude 7.8. 7.8. That struck the southeastern part of the Turkey and northeast western part of Syria and caused widespread damage and loss of life. Anatolia Caucasus segment is prone to large earthquakes, particularly Spitak area, due to the complex interaction between these two plates. Here is the map of the tectonic map of Caucasus region. And according to GPS data, the Arabian plate moves towards the Eurasian plate in northwestern direction at the rate of near the 20 millimeter per year. As a result of mentioned collision, the area of Armenia is continuously exposed to compressive stress in the northeastern near meridian direction at the rate of 10 millimeter per year, which results permanent crustal deformation. These deformations are usually followed by strong earthquake and combined by the formation of system of surface seismic dislocation, primary seismic ruptures, landslide, rock falls, and subsidence of soil. The earthquake of Spitak of 1988 is one of the such events which caused massive destruction of buildings and structures, caused great material damage to the country, and claimed the lives of thousands of the people. Now, I can show some statistic about Spitak earthquake. Here is the source of Spitak earthquake, and the three big cities that damaged by this earthquake. Next, main parameters: date, local time, epicenter near the Spitak city, coordinate magnitude 6.9. Different sources shows the from 6.8 up to 7.1. Intensity 9 of 9 for 10 on the MSK 60 scale. You know, it's 12-degree scale. epicenter depth 10 meter, 10 kilometer. Also different sources shows different depth. The main shock was composed at least 3 separate shocks with 5 and 40-second intervals. First shock was strongest and deepest near the Leninakan. At least 2 foreshocks were recorded on December 6. Number of aftershocks recorded up to date is about 50,000. The first strong aftershock followed 4 minutes after the main shock. Epicentral area is 600 kilometer square. 8 to 10 intensity area, 3,000 kilometers square. Length of seismogenic fault formed or activated on Earth's surface is 37 kilometers. Maximal displacement of rupture is 2.5 meters. Here is the epicentral zone. Okay, surface rupture. Here is the field photos of surface rupture after the earthquake, taken after the earthquake. The earthquake is the epicentral zone caused significant geotechnical changes on the Earth's surface. Co-seismic secondary features are many: landslides, rock falls, dislocation, ledges, cracks, soil subsidence, soil liquefaction, earthquake-originated springs with gas emanation, some of them intermittent, natural dams of fault scarps and associated ponds. Here the vertical displacement of rupture. Here's the different displacement also. Here are the cracks, you see, and 2 big landslides in the area of earthquake. As well, see, here is the rock falls, displays the railroad. Here is the soil subsidence also, and soil liquefaction. In epicentral zone, soil liquefaction was observed on highway that linked the 3 most damaged cities, Spitak, Leninakan, and Vanadzor, and was adjacent to the tributary of the river, where the water table was close to the surface. The highway's embankment failed, and though the site was repaired immediately, the resulting damage of the highway caused considerable delay of getting people and supplies into and out of the area following disaster. Here is also the from the liquefaction, not only the roads, also the lifelines such as sewage and water lines. Here is the scarp of fault creating a pond. Here is the earthquake originated spring. Major losses on the earthquake. The total number of victims is 25,000, among them in Gyumri lost 70,000 people, and 60% of the city area was destroyed. Vanadzor is 1,200 people, and 30% of city are destroyed. Spitak lost 4,000 people, and 100% of city was destroyed. Akudan lost 500 people and 50% of city area. And Stepanova lost 120, and 60% of the city was destroyed. Number of people with disabilities is 140,000. Number of affected people is 1 million. Disaster zone area is 10,000 kilometers. Square kilometer is third part of Armenia. Number of homeless people more than half billion. Number of people, no, 500,000, sorry. Number of people recovered from the ruins, 45,000. Number of hospitalized people, 40,000. Completely ruined cities, 11. Completely ruined villages, 58. Partially ruined cities, 21. And villages, 342. Direct material losses by World Bank estimate in 2017 is 11 to 20 billion. Lost residential area is 9 million square meter. It's near the 20% of housing stock in Armenia. Number of ruined private houses is 61,000. Here is the other losses. I don't read it. Just said that industrial in Armenia industry with lost annual gross output near the 2 billion, and agriculture also the same. Also the destructed the major education and cultural buildings. You see the number of these. And now we want to understand the main causes of this disaster. One year after Spitak earthquake on October 17, 1989, Loma Prieta earthquake occurred on California, on section of San Andreas fault system with a magnitude 6.9, the same as the Spitak earthquake, and intensity of 9. The shock was responsible for 63 deaths, and more near the 4,000 injuries. As you can see, earthquakes were the same strength, but the corresponding consequences are not comparable. Why did the Spitak earthquake have such disastrous effect? As I've already mentioned, among others, 3 main mistakes led to such consequences. That's its underestimation of seismic hazard, poor design, construction and maintenance of residential building, and unpreparedness of such kind of disasters. Seismic hazard, underestimation of seismic hazard. On the left, you see the seismic hazard map at 1988. There's 2 zones with intensity 7 and 8. On the right is the new seismic hazard map But for comparison, here we have magnitudes up to 0.5 G. It's the one of the main causes, underestimation of seismic hazard. The second cause is poor design and construction and maintenance of buildings. The earthquake engineers, expert who examined the damaged building found that the primary reason for the extensive damage caused by the earthquake were design shortcomings and improper construction method, especially those built during the 20 years of last 20 years of the Soviet Union. The Soviets had modified their construction style to accommodate the known seismic risk in the area, but many buildings were not built to withstand the earthquake of that intensity, and even newer homes were collapsed as well. Investigation shows that many buildings that the concrete blocks, in many buildings, the concrete block had been built with enough sand, but too little cement because they had been stolen. Today I see the same problem in the Turkey. In the same time, the buildings that didn't collapse featured well-maintained masonry and skeletal components that were joined together adequately in a way that allowed for the building to resist seismic waves. 3 cities closest to the fault rupture experienced different levels of damage. Leninakan had greater damage than Kirovakan, which may be explained by a 300-400 meter sedimentary layer present beneath the city that amplified the seismic energy. So amplification effects and uneven distribution of the seismic energy may have contributed to the fluctuation of damage across the affected area. Here's the images of buildings. And the third cause is the poor disaster management. Emergency situation in the epicentral area immediately after the earthquake may be described as chaos. The earthquake was unexpected and caused extensive damage to the affected area. Both the authorities and population were unprepared to respond effectively to disaster. The destruction of the lifelines of settlement, including electricity, water, gas, telephone communication, made it difficult to provide assistance and hindered rescue effort. The earthquake caused many buildings to collapse, and tens of thousands of people needed immediately medical attention. However, most healthcare facilities were not functional, and medical staff were also victims of the earthquake. Hospitals were especially hard hit, with many collapsing, killing 2/3 of their doctors and other medical staff, and destroying medical equipment and suppliers. Patients who were brought to the hospital could not be treated due to the lack of minimum required working conditions. On the first day before 95 higher-ranking physicians arrived from Moscow. Resident and local healthcare workers were those who had been providing pre-medical assistance and first aid. The earthquake effects were complicated by the cold winter and poor planning, which limited the availability of medical care in the affected region. The unprepared population was providing pre-medical assistance. During the first 2 days of the disaster, due to the absence of special professional rescue teams, local residents carried out rescue activity without appropriate tools and equipment. A few hours after the earthquake, the large number of vehicles entered the epicentral area, causing heavy traffic and traffic jam. Ruined building also rendered the street impassable. Fires broke out in different parts of settlement due to electrical devices. The absence of telephone communication, lack of water supplies, and heavy traffic hindered effective firefighting. It was almost impossible to fight a fire in rubbles, and it killed many survivors under ruin. The disaster left the residents in need of food, warm clothes, and temporary shelters. The fear of entering building, even those not damaged by earthquake, forced many people spend their nights in the open air. Only on the third day, when the servicemen and employees of Ministry of Internal Affairs entered in the city, the situation began to improve. The lack of rescue forces, necessary minimum living conditions and resources, and the unpreparedness of local authorities increased the rate of casualties and material losses. Rescuers at the time of earthquake, there were no specially prepared rescuers. No, there were no specially prepared rescuers and rescue tools available in Armenia, and inexperienced local residents had to take rescue works themselves using whatever tools and equipment they could find. They extracted about 29,000 people from rubbles. However, individuals brought nearly 1,200 heavy trucks to the site of ruined building, and by the end of the first day, heavy machinery from different parts of Armenia was brought to the devastated cities. Professional rescue arrived from abroad on the third day of earthquake, which significantly improved the situation, and number of survivors rescued increased. The military forces also play an important role in setting the tents and kitchens for the disaster zone population. The first 5 days an earthquake are most important for effective rescue works and saving the large number of peoples. It stated that about 30% of people remaining under the ruins die on the first day, 60% during the last 3 days, during the first 3 days, and 90% in 5 days. The chance of extracting victims from ruins are greatest in the first 3 to 5 days after the earthquake. In Spitak earthquake, one survivor was extracted on the 30th day of and which was the longest recorded survival period at that time. That explains why the strong but not huge earthquake was so damaging with unusually high death toll. The Spitak earthquake death toll was by far the highest worldwide in 1980s and third highest worldwide in the period from 1971 to 2003. Recovery and reconstruction of disaster zone. The disintegration of USSR and the blockade of Armenia imposed by Azerbaijan and Turkey were significant factors that hindered timely implementation of recovery efforts. There were many objective and subjective factors hindering timely implementation of recovery. Among them, most important were the disintegration of USSR and the blockade. The Republic Armenia was not ready to cope with such large scale destruction and to realize the recovery alone, both in terms of financing and available capacities. Despite the promises, $12.5 billion in aid by the USSR government, only a small fraction of that amount was actually allocated. The aid that was provided by 130 foreign countries was mainly humanitarian and in nature, with focus on providing food, clothes, medicine, and medical care in the rescue phase. While support was later provided for the construction of medical and educational institution and apartment, the scale of damage was so extensive that it was insufficient. The supply of construction material from Russia to Armenia through Azerbaijan was stopped 1 year after the earthquake due to blockade of railway communication. The construction facilities initially established in earthquake zone were closing their activity, and 54,000 construction workers and professionals who arrived from different USSR republics left Armenia. They spent half a year to build construction facilities and to implement geological surveys and design activities for the construction. However, effective construction works lasted for 1.5 years only. During that period, construction of more than 1,000 of buildings was launched, but most of them remained incomplete. Recovery works had not been resumed until 1998, when their main responsibility was undertaken by the government and newly independent Armenia, which decided to complete the rehabilitation work in 4 years based on a new program. That program, again, was never realized. And only in 2017, the registered homeless population had been provided with apartments. Main achievement of this phase. In half a year, homeless people were provided with sufficient number of temporary shelters. At least 35,000 shelters were installed in Gyumri. After the earthquake, provision of livelihood and medical care to disaster zone population was organized quite successfully. About 100 more than 1,000 people were evacuated into resorts located in Armenia and USSR. Schools education arranged in Armenia and other republics. And more than 10,000 people had been received hospital treatment till March 1989. The rescue operation, even under very complicated conditions, were successfully organized on the 3rd days after this earthquake. The problem of homeless people has been resolved only 30 years ago after the earthquake. Schools and medical facilities have been reinforced or built in line with new level of hazard assessment. Order and rule of disaster zone were rapidly restored. There were no mass law violations and epidemic outbreaks. A certain mistake and omissions of this phase. No political support had been provided throughout the entire period of the disaster zone rehabilitation. No comprehensive programs of rehabilitation and reconstruction of disaster zone was developed based on international experience. The economic rehabilitation was not combined with physical reconstruction, which was postponed and never implemented. Industrial enterprises lost their product markets. In the years of the USSR, under the influence of fear and an exceedingly durable and expensive construction was carried out. Local materials and human resources were not used properly. A large number of construction equipment and construction facilities established by USSR realized disaster zone rehabilitation. After disintegration of after the integration of the USSR, were later robbed and wasted. In cities, land plots for individual construction were not allocated timely, hence enormous funds were wasted, built, and later to demolish in temporary shelters. No tax, custom, and banking privilege were given to disaster zone to promote its economy, development, and prevent migration. International aid, the entire world responded to the Spitak tragedy. Mikhail Gorbachev was in New York on his first day visit with Ronald Reagan at the time of the earthquake. And once the scale of disaster was realized, despite the tension of Cold War, Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev formally asked the United States for humanitarian help within a few days of earthquake. It was the first such request since the Second World War. Washington immediately responded with offers of doctors, medical equipment, and rescue teams. In total, 130 countries sent a substantial amount of humanitarian aid to the Soviet Union, and in the form of rescue equipment, search teams, and medical supplies. Private donation and assistance from non-governmental organizations also had a large part of the implementation, the international effort. As on July 1989, about $500 million in donation had been delivered in Armenia from abroad. Most of this fund went into the initial relief works and medical care, plus the beginning portion of the rebuilding phase. Many factors contributed to this, but three of which were perhaps the most meaningful. But the scale of disaster was so great for the small republic that the world could not remain indifferent. There is restructuring of the society and the collapse of the socialist camp that had been launched in the USSR those days was called to attach greater importance to democratic values, and many countries rejected the totalitarian regime. Armenian diaspora also had a significant contribution in helping Armenia and organizing the aid. Undoubtedly, the help rendered by USSR government and the republics was great. The disaster zone population was provided with financing support, clothes and food and medical aid. The allocation of about 60,000 temporary shelters, building materials and population facilities was essential. Another important part of international aid was the scientific cooperation. Seismologists and geologists from the USA, France, and Russia helped to study and understand the grave lessons taught at Spitak. 12 days after the main shock, the French-Soviet team installed temporary seismic network with 26 seismometers in the epicentral area to record aftershock activity. Separate expedition from the United States also visited the site. Plunged those hard days, the international scientific cooperation has continued till today. The data obtained in the course of the transborder cooperation laid the foundation for the modern studies on active tectonics, seismotectonic, and paleoseismology in Armenia. The main factors that enabled launching successful research were scientific cooperation with experts from Europe and the United States, training of young Armenian scientists in Western University, and utilization of up-to-date international methodologies and techniques. After the Spitak earthquake, cooperation between Armenia and its neighboring country in the study of seismotectonic paleoseismology, GPS and seismological monitoring, and seismic hazard and risk assessment was increased considerably. The period was remarkable for the start of joint research project by Armenia, Georgia, Azerbaijan, Iranian, and Turkish scientists in collaboration with Western experts. Great number of joint studies have been performed under the International Scientific Program. An up-to-date seismological network and the array of continuous GPS measurement were established. And the main achievement of Spitak earthquake over the last 30 years. The Spitak earthquake played an enormous role in development of seismic protection system and seismic safety provision in Armenia. In 1991, the National Survey for Seismic Protection of Armenia was established and brought the issue of seismic safety of the Republic up to a new level. Many governmental, non-governmental, academic, and private institutions were involved in studies of natural hazard and risk assessment. In fact, no activity on seismic protection is carried out nowadays without considering the lesson learned from the Spitak tragedy. It also had great contribution in the development of seismology and seismotectonic. In summary, it is possible to indicate the following fields of seismic protection that have been established in the country based on the study of data related to the causes of Spitak earthquake and the effect it had. First, it's earthquake resistant construction. Establishment of new building code of Armenia, design typical earthquake resistant residential building, development of techniques to upgrade seismic resistance and construction quality of building. Study of earth crust and geodynamics, development of new models and layouts for the block structure of earth crust dynamics in the territory of Armenia, estimation of quantitative block motion characteristics, improved assessment of location parameters and the dynamics of seismically active faults, and estimation of their seismic potential. Seismic hazard assessment at different levels, beginning from seismic microzoning and detailed zoning, and ending with general seismic zoning and prediction of strong earthquake and the current seismic hazard. Many maps have been compiled, including seismic microzoning for the area of all cities of Armenia, general deterministic probabilistic seismic zoning map of Armenia, detailed zoning maps for the large cities and areas adjacent to the site of Armenian nuclear plant. Seismic risk assessment, development of seismic risk assessment methodologies for residential areas and the introduction of advanced methods softwares to implement seismic risk assessment for the cities of Yerevan, Gyumri, Vanadzor, and more than 30 other urban areas in Armenia, including estimation of seismic vulnerability of building, potential material and human losses, damage of lifeline infrastructure, and risk related to secondary hazard posed by earthquake. And seismic risk reduction, development of the problem solution strategy and international cooperation, establishment of legal framework for seismic risk reduction, operating seismic resistance building, increase of resilience among the population, public administration and local government, elaboration and application of methods related to disaster management and elimination of disaster effect. Efficient and prompt response, obtaining skills and knowledge in disaster zone recovery and restoration efforts, rescue team, and etc. The accumulated experience enabled experts to change their views related to issue of seismic, geological, geophysical, geodynamic, and geochemical, and other observation and more detailed, comprehensive interpretation of the data, which served the basis of development of Ministry of Emergency Situation Monitoring Network, improving data collection and processing methods, and to address many other applied tasks. The most important achievement is that Armenia is currently better prepared to face seismic disaster than it was before. And as conclusion, I would like to show you the words of Dr. Shebalin, the seismologist head of laboratories of strong earthquake of the Earth Physics Institute of Russian Academy. The catastrophe shook not only the entire thickness of Earth's crust, but also the whole stratum of our society. All that had been rotten collapsed. The unreasonable optimistic layout of seismic zoning of Armenia and the structures of multi-story building deliberately made to reduce the expenses, the over-regulated civil protection system and the inept system of local administration. We as members of editorial board of the seismic zoning map of the USSR, who allowed adoption of underestimated rates of seismic hazard in Caucasus, will bear our cross and are to be blamed. That's all. Thank you for attention. I'm sorry.
Thank you so much, Saran. That was really interesting. And I think that we do have a few minutes for questions. If
Okay.
um,
Yes.